Government welcomes yesterday's decision by the U.S. Court of International Trade, which is consistent with Canada's long-standing position that the U.S. IEEPA tariffs were unlawful as well as unjustified. That said, we recognize that our trading relationship with the United States is still profoundly and adversely threatened.
There is a troubling and dangerous trend of unelected judges inserting themselves into the presidential decision-making process. America cannot function if President Trump, or any other president for that matter, has their sensitive diplomatic or trade negotiations railroaded by activist judges.
Reaction there from Ottawa and the White House to a decision by the U.S. Court of International Trade striking down the tariffs that Donald Trump launched on Canada and much of the world. But late this afternoon, a U.S. appeals court then reinstated those tariffs, at least temporarily pending appeal. With us now is former Canadian ambassador to the U.S., Burney. Mr. Burney, good to have you back. Thank you very much for making the time.
Good with you, Vashi.
I know that ultimately there was a pause and those tariffs are reinstated. But the initial court decision yesterday, does it give you a glimmer of hope that there might be recourse eventually to stopping the imposition of these tariffs?
Well, it was certainly a voice of reason in a debate that has been completely irrational for far too long. I'm not surprised by the verdict. These are trade experts that were involved in the ruling. They saw some of the tariffs, not all of them, but some of the tariffs as being not only illegal, but unconstitutional. Many of us have been saying that for several months. I mean, what I respect most in the decision is that they make it certain that Congress is the part of the government in the United States that has the authority over tariffs, not the president. And yet, if you hear his spokesman, it would seem like, you know, he's the emperor and the king all wrapped in one. He could do anything he wants and doesn't have to pay attention to any of the other elements of the administration, or the government, rather. Well, that's just not the case. Now, I know for a fact that Congress can give the administration what we used to call fast-track authority to negotiate trade agreements, which are then brought back to Congress for approval. But there's no way that Congress is going to surrender to the president unilateral power to impose tariffs. That is just not the way the U.S. system works. Nobody knows why, if they're being ripped off by so many countries on trade, why aren't they using the recourse they have under trade agreements to appeal those grounds? But they don't do that. They just hit everybody with a wide brush. So it's nice to see somebody push back. And now Congress will steel itself up to asserting its authority. Well, it could be a different game. You know, there are lots of loopholes or hoops you have to go through with appeals and all of the rest. And the administration does have other tools in its kit that it can use. I mean, the ones that they're using on aluminum, steel, and autos under Section 232 of the Trade Act, we used to call that the nuclear bomb. Well, they can apply it to lumber or whatever they wish. And we'll have to be very cautious about what we do with the Americans in this uncertain period. And we have to be absolutely vigilant in asserting the illegality and unconstitutionality of what they're doing.
And I just want to pick up when you mentioned Congress and its authority here, because on other occasions we've talked throughout this whole sort of evolving threat about the degree to which we haven't heard a lot of voices in Congress or amongst our kind of usual suspects of allies in the business community, for example, kind of defending the idea of free trade, pushing back against the concept that they are contravening the very agreement that they negotiated and signed. Do you think a court decision like yesterday's will embolden at all people in Congress to, make the argument in a more pronounced way than we've seen so far?
Well, I would hope so, Vashi, because there are some sensible voices in Congress and people who know a lot about trade more than some of Mr. Trump's trade advisors. But, you can't bank on this. I mean, the president is being assaulted in the courts on many issues, on everything from transgender issues to immigration. And I can't help but think that members of Congress feel that they have to rally around the president when he's under attack on so many fronts. But be that as it may, if this leads to a more sensible discussion of trade, an issue that is vital to the bilateral relationship, it should be good news. We can't guarantee anything at this point, and we should be cautious in any discussions we have with the Americans. You know, some of those who are trying to conclude deals with the United States have already pulled back because they want to know what the lay of the land is before they move to implement an agreement, which may be beyond what they have to do in order to get an agreement. So the uncertainty prevails. Canada has to keep its powder dry, be very cautious, obviously talk to the Americans as they wish, try to clarify what their objectives are with us on national security and trade. You know, we have this wonderful new Golden Dome to talk about, which is probably something we can deal with pragmatically, but provided we've got the money. But it's a voice of reason. It's a good shot by a credible court. This is not some rogue judge, you know, in some blue belt court in the United States. These are trade experts on the court. There's a court, I think there are 11 or 12 of them, and it was a 3-judge ruling. 2 of them were appointed by Republicans, one by Donald Trump, one by Barack Obama, and the other by George Bush. So there you have it. It was a bipartisan court decision. Nobody can dispute that. Let's see how it plays out. It's going to go to the Court of Appeal. It may ultimately go to the Supreme Court. But, you know, Mr. Trump's batting average with the courts hasn't been Ted Williams like, you know.
Not quite. I have time for just one final question, and I wanted it to be about when you mentioned Canada's approach moving forward and sort of the note of caution that you expressed. I interviewed the new U.S. ambassador last week, and he expressed optimism that there could be a quote-unquote deal or a framework deal by July in place. There's speculation that both sides hope to be able to present something even in advance of the G7 taking place in the middle of June in Kananaskis. What is your best advice to the federal government as they navigate all of this about the prospect of, and I use the air quote sign, like a deal?
Well, obviously, I don't know what discussions are taking place. And frankly, I don't have a high regard for the caliber of the discussions that we've had up until now to the extent that I know about them. So my watchword would be caution. I don't think anybody's going to move to strike a deal with the United States in the next couple of weeks, given the outstanding court action pending. So I would urge our government to be cautious, be open at all times to whatever conversations the Americans want. As I said, we can easily talk about national security. You know, it's interesting that one of the other points the court made was the use of the fentanyl emergency for the action, national emergency, was totally bogus. Well, I've said that for months. Many other people have said that. So, it's not a unique decision. The administration must have seen it coming, Vashi, because they had their appeal already within minutes of the verdict coming down. So it can't have been a surprise to them. But it sure tarnishes the reputation of the people who are giving trade advice to the president. And they should bear that in mind. And we should keep it in mind, too. We don't have to be sucked into anything.
I'll leave it on that most perfect note. Mr. Burney, thanks as always. Appreciate your analysis. And nice hat. Derek Burney is a former Canadian ambassador to the U.S., as well as former chief of staff to former Prime Minister Brian Mulroney.